Hey everybody, welcome back to Avalon, episode 25. Today's episode, we're starting on one of the two rail hubs we talked about the last episode. So if you remember, we had two rail hubs planned. There was the main one next to the big interchange, and there was the secondary one, which is sort of off to the side. And we talked about it a little bit. I kind of mentioned that it would be smaller than the main hub, and that it would be servicing lots of the above ground rail, the yellow line, but also some of the below ground rail, like the purple line, actually, of the purple system. We're also going to have a high-speed rail connection here. This is going to be one of the connections to the outside world through the railway, so we'll have that as well. And today's episode is really just focused on the planning of kind of the skeleton of this whole station. So it is very large, and we need to kind of figure out where all the trains are going to go, where the people will flow into the station from, and sort of the surrounding areas, and how the vehicles will have access to this station, and how pedestrians can walk to this station. So lots of things to consider as we build this system, and also on top of that, connecting all the different lines from their respective heights was kind of a challenge. So you can see we already have two elevated station pieces there that are at the same height as our current elevated system, and that elevated system is kind of special in that it's literally like 30 meters in the air. So I really don't want to have too much height change going on. I want to make sure that all of our stations for the above ground yellow loop will remain at this like 30-meter elevation. So we had to figure out a way to make that work, and that was kind of a challenge, because you can see here we needed to get these two modular station pieces to fit next to these ground level other metro station pieces. So I thought it was kind of a cool opportunity to try to fit in like a little shopping district kind of indoor section of the station. So the station, it actually kind of behaves quite a bit, or it reminds me at least a lot of an airport, in that there's like these spokes, I guess. Well, not really spokes. They're more like they're like spokes in the sense of like DIA spokes, Denver International Airport spokes, right? They're just like these little indoor sections kind of between each like grouping of track, I guess is the best way to say it. So it was kind of fun actually to have all of this vertical space to play with. So you can see we can actually fit full-sized buildings underneath these tracks, which is pretty cool. So we'll be doing a little bit of building, manipulation and kind of playing around with what can fit down here in this episode, and then we'll really get into the detailing of this stuff in a future episode. So speaking of the way that I'm organizing these episodes, I do want to talk a little bit about that again. I mentioned it last episode, but now that we're kind of getting into the flow of things again, and I'm uploading videos on a regular weekly basis, which actually seems pretty feasible, I have to say I really didn't think that I'd be able to maintain a weekly schedule with everything else that I've got going on, but I think that it's possible, and the way that it's possible is kind of adjusting the way that I approach creating videos for YouTube. So in the past, I was a lot more focused on like, okay, I want to get this thing done in one or I want to do this thing next, right? And so then I would spend hours and hours and hours working on something, and then sometimes it would be a couple hours and it would fit nicely into an episode, and then sometimes it would be a huge project that would take me like 4 or 5 episodes worth of footage, and I'd just cut that all down, and then I'd do the voiceovers, and a lot of the footage would be lost that I was that I'd recorded of me working on it, for one thing, and the episode would also usually be a bit longer. So what I'm thinking about doing instead is more just not worrying so much about like what I decide to focus on per episode, and not be so afraid of doing multi-part episodes. So that's going to be a common theme for this rail station, because it is such a big project. But I have to say that recording it this way was really, really, like, I guess motivating is a good word. Maybe it was just a little more freeing, because I didn't have to worry so much about getting everything done in one episode. And so it let me like really slow down and add a lot of detail, put a lot of thought into everything that I was doing. I didn't feel like I was trying to rush through it so that I could create an episode out of it. So So I'm gonna kind of play with this idea. I think the next like 5 or 6 or 7 episodes will be this way, because again, it is really like the only way that I can actually produce content regularly. And these episodes will probably be between 10 and 15 minutes long, occasionally a bit longer than 15 minutes. And that's sort of the way I see this working out in the future. So I'm curious what you guys think about this. I think that for me personally, it's actually a better format. It really allows me to create better things, and as you'll see, I kind of have like the foresight of the next few episodes, but I really feel like the station comes together nicely because I have that extra time to work on, you know, or at least I have the ability to slow down and work on each section as it comes. So anyway, that's enough of that. I just wanted to bring that up really quick. If you're wondering why the episodes have gotten shorter, that's sort of what's going on. But the nice side effect of that is you guys get to see a lot more of what I'm doing, because usually I cut out a lot more footage, and I do cut out quite a bit of footage anyway. I try to only show the stuff that's interesting, but this way we're not missing whole sections of things that I'm working on, which is kind of cool as well. But anyway, right now we're working on getting the main rail line connected, and you can see that again we're following the same thing we did last time, where I really want to keep these curves and these changes in elevation as gradual as possible. I am planning on making this a bullet train route, so you know we're gonna have very high-speed trains traveling on these tracks, so I'd like to keep them, you know, relatively gradual. And of course, this is the area where it's approaching the station, so it won't be going, you know, super fast, but it's still like a, you know, it's still a bullet train, so it needs to be relatively smooth approaching the station. So that's what's going on there. And this line will go on the very outside of the station, so I've just left it at its same height. It doesn't have to really do anything special to get there, whereas we have all these other metro lines, like some of them that are coming out of the ground and are going to become above ground metro. That stuff has to kind of all merge into this same, you know, trough of train tracks, and they also have to get, you know, out of the ground and to the right height. So those took a little bit more manipulation to get them kind of fit properly, but in the end, we're going to have this really dense grouping of track that's going to kind of flow in this direction towards the station, which I really love. It feels a lot like the areas around like the main station in Osaka, or you know, other train stations in Tokyo. That's kind of the inspiration behind all of this stuff here. But you can see we're going to expand this station even wider. I didn't really count correctly, actually, the first time that I built this, and I realized that these stations were all single track stations, and we've got 2 double tracks coming out of the ground that we have to, you know, connect to the station as well. So we actually needed double the capacity that I thought we did, and that's where all of this stuff is coming from. So it ended up being a really big station, but again, it was kind of a fun opportunity because now we've got all this extra space in between the stations, and there was this challenge of like, okay, how do we get service vehicles and pedestrians to access the actual like access point on the building, right? Because, you know, the first 2 are easy, they connect to the main road, but then the others that kind of expand outwards, we need to have access to those, but we don't want to have people crossing the tracks, obviously, unless they can go over top of them. So that's where some elevated pathway comes into play, and some secret underground service roads that will come a little bit later to make sure that we get all the services we need for that as well. But in the meantime, we need to get all of these metro connections all linked up, and this was actually kind of more of a challenge than I thought it was going to be. The nice thing about the main rail is I'm only using one width of track, so it's really easy to kind of split tracks and have them go in different directions. But when we came to this part, you can see we need to go from this double width track to the single width track, and it's weird. Like when you connect them, it creates like a little junction, and the junction is the width of a single width track, so it looks kind of like odd, like it kind of bends in and then out again. So I ended up kind of like creating the junctions on a curve, and that let me kind of mask the fact that it was making these weird junctions, and I think it actually turned out pretty good. But after seeing how the mod handles these kinds of connections, I think I'm gonna avoid using these double width tracks, like at least for the above ground, right? The below ground, it works fantastic because you'd never have to actually see them. But for the above ground, I think it's easier to make things look nice if you just stick with the single width and you have 2 of them, and then, you know, when you need to actually have them connect to each other. You can create little junctions, and that's all fine. But that's what I use on the other side of a station. But this side had to have some special manipulation to make things look a bit nicer. But in the end, we got it all connected pretty nicely, and it looks pretty cool, I have to say. It does have a pretty big footprint. That's the one thing that will be interesting. And like the further that I got into this project, the more that I realized that I was really digging myself deep into a long multi-part project where I'm gonna have to like really think about, you know, how we can fit all the buildings around here and utilize this space in an effective way so it doesn't just get wasted. And that'll be kind of fun to tackle a bit later on. But in the meantime, what you're seeing right now is my first time ever using procedural objects. Now you might have seen that little procedural objects button on the top right of my screen for pretty much the entirety of Avalon. I've had this mod for forever, but I've always been kind of uneasy about using it. I think the main thing, I don't know if I mentioned this in an episode or not, but the main thing is that it takes so much more time. It's kind of like the next step. Like imagine playing City Skylines without Move It and without Find It or more beautification. So you can't place any props, right? If you played City Skylines like that, I mean, you can build stuff so fast, right? You're not adding props, you're not doing really hardly any detailing besides like plopping some trees and stuff. But the second that you start plopping props, you've really like doubled or even tripled the time you spend on each section. So I feel like procedural objects is like the next step in doubling or tripling your work time. And it wasn't too bad in this one because all I'd used it for was to create this big station platform. But effectively what it lets you do, if you don't know, is you can take any object like a building or a prop. Actually, I don't think you can take a prop. You can take a building and you can convert it. Actually, no, you can convert props. Yeah, you can convert everything. So you can take any of these objects, you can convert it to a PO object. And the cool thing about this is PO objects don't count towards your prop count. So you can use these and actually increase the number of objects you can have in your game because they're a totally separate type of object. But anyway, once you convert it to a PO object, you've got all these new options. You can start like tweaking the individual vertices that make up the object. So you can like scale the whole thing, you can stretch it, you can shrink it, you can do all kinds of things with it. It's actually a really, really powerful mod. And you can imagine now like why it would slow down your build time by so much, because now you have all these options, right? You could like spend all this time tweaking a single prop and then place that prop in the same time it would have taken you to place, you know, one prop, right? So, or not the same time, in like triple the time. This is the point I'm trying to make. So it does take a lot longer, but it also yields a much better result. So I am very excited to use procedural objects more. And in fact, this station in particular is going to be a pretty deep dive into procedural objects as we try to create some pretty cool things. The main thing that I really want to do is I want to have some elevated pedestrian walkways that really feel like natural and organic. So I want to create them out of ploppable surfaces and, you know, other props, and then I want to use invisible walkways to actually make them functional. So you'll see that in a few episodes from now, but that will require a lot of PO, especially because, you know, to create those actual organic looking walkways, we want to be able to tweak all of our elevated ploppable surfaces, and we're probably going to have to really manipulate a lot of props and buildings so that they actually fit in this area. So this will be, I can say with confidence actually, this is without a doubt the most modded station I've ever built, the most modded thing I've ever built in City Skylines, and you'll see that more in the future episodes. But it's also fun. So hopefully maybe after you see me using this mod, you might also consider using procedural objects. I think that it's actually not as hard to learn as I imagined. There's some functionality in it that like is kind of missing, or at least that I wish existed. Like maybe I'm just spoiled with Move It, but Move It has all of these features for like selecting things, aligning heights, you know, snapping things, and you can't really do that as much in procedural objects. The big thing that I really wish you could do is like, you know, snap vertices to other objects, but that's just, you know, that's kind of infeasible, right? Because a lot of the times the thing you want to snap a vertice to isn't even a procedural object, so that's really not even possible. But even between procedural objects, it would be great if you could like snap vertices so that you don't have to like try to freeform kind of get them as close as possible. The copy pasting is kind of weird. A lot of the functionality that you would normally use with Move It, you just end up using Move It for anyway. So like I'll create an object in PO, then I'll exit the PO menu, and then I'll go to Move It, and then I'll do all my copying and pasting, right? So it does have some quirky things about it, but all in all, it's really a game changer. So it's absolutely worth checking out if you haven't already. If you don't mind spending a bunch of time detailing, because you will spend a bunch of time detailing. But anyway, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll come back next time and focus on some of the other ways to get to the station. So obviously we need to have some better connections for our roads, for our highways, and for our pedestrians, and that'll all get visited in the next episode. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.